Whether you're part of the production team or with your company's purchasing department, understanding the real value of regulatory compliant cylinder labels is more important than you might realize. Hi, my name's Rob Freeman. I'm with Label Solutions, and today we'll learn the difference between the price of a label and the potential cost of that label. Two different things. We'll also learn what you can do to make sure you use the correct regulatory compliant labels for your cylinders. This 25-minute presentation also includes a separate certification exam that you can order from Label Solutions. It's specifically designed for companies that are looking for continuing education material for their employees. Okay, so let's begin. Know the real cost of cylinder labels and the potential penalties. And so what you see here are two different agencies. You have OSHA, which pertains to the laws within a company facility within the building. And then you also have the U.S. Department of Transportation, which is basically all U.S. roads and highways and the transportation laws that pertain to that, within the U.S. roads. So, really the gist here is, or the importance here is really for new employees in particular, but it's for everyone. It's to really know the difference between the lowest price of a label versus the actual potential cost of that label. And here's what I mean. So for OSHA lists a maximum penalty of $12,675 per violation, whereas the DOT, Federal Hazardous Material Transportation Law, carries a maximum civil penalty of $78,376 for each violation. And so what that means is if the label on a cylinder is not compliant or does not follow the regulatory compliant laws or falls off, peels, or is not legible on the cylinder, they could incur these type of violations. And you have to ask yourself, what does violation mean? In other words, does that mean per incident or does that mean per cylinder? For example, if a flatbed truck was pulled over and it had 30 cylinders on the bed itself, and there were several of these cylinders that were in violation, is it just the truck that's given one incident or one violation, or does that count towards all the cylinders that are in violation? And here you see the reason why this is so important. Now in yellow here you see highlighted at the top, with all the changes that are taking place in the gas industry, I thought it was important to make sure that the departments such as the plant manager, the production manager, as well as the procurement department, or also known as the purchasing department, do they understand the real cost behind regulatory compliant labels when comparing prices? And so that's extremely important, and it seems to be often overlooked, especially with all the changes taking place. It's easy to continue to do what you need to do on a day-to-day basis and not necessarily update the departments if they're trying to get the best price. Are they doing it the right way? Are they comparing apples to apples and making sure that all the materials and the right materials are being priced out the same way? Next, we have major differences between compliant and non-compliant label suppliers. A good rule of thumb is if you can't pick up the phone and talk to somebody in person at your label printing company, at this label supplier, if they don't have somebody that can talk about the latest changes in compliance, regulatory compliance for your labels, you're not talking to the right company. And that really is a good rule of thumb basically to go by. One of the takeaways from this presentation is something to remember. But let's go through a couple of other items. Even if you're not a buyer per se, it's always good to know that you can talk to a company regarding any customer support issues, or if you have a new product, a new type of surface, and you need to make sure that the labels stay adhered to that surface for that 5-year period. You can work with companies like us, and we'll go in and help create solutions for you based on the different services or different time frames that you need. So anyway, starting off here with the first item here for compliance, for companies that are compliant, um, we produce the labels to support CGA industry standards and strict specifications. For those of you new in the industry, CGA stands for Compressed Gas Association. We try to uphold producing all of the labels under the CGA standards and specifications. Next, notifies customers of any CGA, DOT, OSHA, FDA changes prior to our customer placing an order. We try to be proactive when any government agency makes an announcement. So we'll send out our e-blasts and all that kind of material, but we don't always reach everyone. But what we do is notify the customer that if they're placing another order with us regarding a label that is out of compliance, we notify that customer right away. So we let them determine how they would like to proceed with that order. We try to work with them from the standpoint of working with their inventory and things like that. So next is all materials and inks on every label maintains a 5-year warranty. So if you're not familiar, cylinder circulation, meaning when it leaves your facility and goes out into the field to your customers' locations, they may keep that cylinder for a long period of time, sometimes on an average of 3 to 5 years before it needs to be refilled. So that long-term cycle is extremely important, and on that note, it's important for us to make sure that the label maintains that 5-year warranty for that purpose. Another item too is conducts extensive multi-year testing to ensure quality control and durability of the label on the cylinder. So we do multi-year testing, and so the simulation technology that's out there, you can simulate 1 year within a 1-month type of testing on some of the equipment that's out there. But it doesn't make sense to only test it for that 1 year if the cylinder is to be out in the field for that 3 to 5 year period. It just doesn't make sense from a quality standpoint. So that's one thing that we make sure and do, that we go through a thorough type of testing and make sure that the right type of material is used, the right type of adhesive and inks and all of that sustains its durability for that 5-year period. So on the other side of this coin, we take a look at non-compliant label providers. Commonly they will sell that whole lowest purchase price theme. Basically, they're using the cheapest products to get to that lowest price. Quality is not the issue, price is. That's really what it comes down to. And again, remember, if you call them up, you can't talk to anyone about compliance. They'll probably try to switch the conversation to the lowest price point. Next item is results in expensive fines and penalties from not following DOT or OSHA compliance or the proper specifications to construct the label itself. Next item, low quality. Overall cheaper material and adhesives will cause the labels to fail in the field. It's just a matter of time. Usually we see that the cheaper labels begin to fail around that 12 to 18 month period. Next, doesn't withstand weather conditions or long-term storage. Same reason. When you use a cheaper adhesive, the temperatures that fluctuate throughout the year begin to really affect the adhesive, and you start to see eventually the labels start to peel or curl and sometimes crack on the other side of that. But the idea there is when it starts to curl, you're starting to see the failure in the adhesive, and that's very typical around that 12 to 18 month period. And then finally, these label providers enter into the market from industries that do not self-regulate. The CGA organization self-regulates, and so they prefer to write their own standards and guidelines in order to uphold a certain high quality out in the field for the entire industry. If the label provider is not familiar with that, they're not familiar with the penalties. Next, we have a couple of slides to review These are of the actual labels themselves. So in this case, we're looking at a non-compliant and poorly constructed label. And it's important to note as we start off here at the bottom there, this important note is the information that's printed on the label itself relates to the compliance aspect of the label. All the images, the UN number, what's actually printed on the label is what is considered to be the compliance aspect of the label. Now, outside of that, the quality and the construction of the label are considered to be separate, but if the label is made of poor quality and construction, the label could fail or fall off, and at that point, the cylinder could result in a fine. And so that's the risk there, is the poor quality of the materials used. So here's a few examples of what to look for on a poorly constructed label, and it's difficult to see this when they're first printed, but within those timelines after that first year, you do see this come back and you start to see these problems. They're typical, and it's you don't want to see these in your production facility, but unfortunately it still occurs out there in the industry. But these are some things to watch for. So poor quality substrates. So what that means is the material, the actual vinyl or the actual label itself of what the ink is printed on, and on the underside is what the adhesive is, that substrate can easily peel from excessive condensation. It doesn't really handle the weathering. It can fade, tear, curl, sometimes even tarnish because of the weather conditions. And that tarnish look is that orange or a yellowish type of tint that begins to collect around the edges of the label itself. Cheap adhesives. It loses its hold on the cylinder surface very quickly. Could be that it becomes so brittle and begins to flake and chip and doesn't adapt to the different seasons and temperatures. Does not support the heat, cold, or moisture conditions. The label commonly falls off of the cylinders during delivery, especially if it's a flatbed truck and you have your outdoor delivery kind of scenario. That's very, very typical. Let's go ahead and go to unprotected inks. The idea there is we've seen where companies will use a fairly durable ink, a UV protected ink, except they'll commonly use water-based inks for branding or for the imprint, the company's logo or contact information, and we see that will fade out in the field quite a bit. We never use water-based inks just for that reason, especially within that 3 to 5 year period. We see that water-based inks, it is what it is. That is a water base. It's affected by all moisture and will fade eventually, and so we try to stay away from that when possible. And then we go to the actual compliance side of it. It's does this provider actually specialize in the CGA guidelines, or are they trying to follow others and are slow to adapt to the changes that are out there, whether they're new guidelines or they could be interpretations by the DOT or OSHA. These companies usually are laggards in making the changes in the right way. The provider does not have dedicated in-house regulatory compliance staff. The provider does not proactively notify the customer. These a lot of the things here is if it's just not written properly, there are all kinds of things of, here's an example here. Look at the non-flammable gas, that green pictogram there. And that's a 2-line. In other words, non-flammable is 1 line, gas is another line. And to kind of share with you how detailed this can be, this became non-compliant not long ago. And because it's on 2 lines, it has to now be on 1 line. So that was recent, but there may be new changes where it goes back to 2-line or 1 line. But at this point, the DOT has specified that it be on one line. It's interesting how these will change from time to time, but the idea is if you're following the guidelines and following the new interpretations, a label provider should be proactive in making those changes ahead of time. So in comparison, we have a regulatory compliant label from our library. Here you see the nitrogen compressed label, non-flammable gas. No, I won't spend too much time on this. I think we're covering what we need to for what we have, what a compliant label would be. But, the importance behind this is, using the right durable materials, the substrates and liner. This is the material that the ink is printed on. The adhesives, that it maintains that 5-year duration, and probably more importantly, the adhesive is formulated to support both high heat and extreme cold conditions. I just can't tell you enough. There's just too many of these cylinders that are stored and transported outdoors for a long period of time, and so it's important to have that adhesive retain its durability on that 5-year period. Same thing applies with UV protected inks. The UV protection reduces the effects of the sunlight exposure, and then also too, we just don't use the water-based inks. We can do that, but we just don't recommend it, especially for this industry. And then also too, from the compliance side, regulatory compliance. Label Solutions is a contributor to the CGA HASCOM C7 rulings, but we also take the proactive approach to our customers to make sure that they're informed as much as possible, as well as the fact that we've got the safety nets to be able to notify the customer if we identify a label that is outdated or needs to be changed. We notify the customer and help work with them based on what they may already have in inventory and help flush that out before we produce the updated version, unless it's necessary. So over the last few slides here, what did we learn? Relating to quality control, compliance deals with the information printed on the label, while the quality and construction of the label are not a matter of compliance. However, if the label is of poor quality and fails or even falls off, then it becomes a matter of compliance and could result in a costly fine. Procurement. Only purchasing at the lowest price point per label is extremely risky and could end up costing thousands of dollars per violation for your company. In other words, if all they're doing is going by the lowest price, are they considering that all the suppliers who they're comparing are using the same type of materials? It's a key question, often overlooked. Next is educating. If the plant manager relies on his or her procurement department to purchase labels, he or she should notify and educate procurement about the importance of compliance and the possible fines that could apply if not followed. Industry standards. Regulatory compliant cylinder labels should be produced with the proper materials and inks to support the industry standard 5-year cylinder cycle. Compliance assistance. Label Solutions offers free regulatory compliant assistance and artwork proofing for all compressed gas cylinder customers. Just pick up the phone and give our customer service a call, and we'll be more than happy to help. Proper testing. Label Solutions offers thorough multi-year testing services of label materials on cylinders and provides visual and metric feedback on those results. Testing a label for just 1 year is not sufficient, since cylinders can remain in the field for 3 to 5 years. Well, that concludes our training for this program. And if you would like more information from our company, we have 2 different types of free material that I highly recommend. One, we have an updated GHS technical guide. If you were in the industry back in 2015, you may recognize this. We have recently updated this with all of the minor changes that recently took place over the past, I'd say, year and a half. Same thing applies with a poster. This wall poster that you see here on the right is an 18-inch by 24-inch wall poster. It has been updated for this year, and so I highly recommend it. It takes you through a couple of different scenarios and gives you some great reference material there, all on the wall there, hanging up by your desk or the plant area for everyone's reference kind of thing. So if you are interested, just give our customer support team a call or email Kate Allen, that's Kathy Allen, at easylabeling.com, and we'll be more than happy to send out the quantities that you need. So for those of you that watch this presentation to take the certification exam, if you haven't already done so, please contact your manager, or it might be your company instructor, and they should have a copy of the exam to give to you. And just as a reminder, the exam consists of 10 true-false questions, and your instructor will define what the passing score will need to be in order for you to receive a Label Solutions Certificate of Achievement. But down below here, you can kind of see what one would look like. Well, that concludes the presentation here. Really appreciate those that are taking the time to learn a little bit more about the labels. I know these can sometimes seem like such simple little items, but the more you know about regulatory compliant labels, I think you'll realize very quickly these are very important items that fit as part of a complete solution to your cylinder. So thank you again. If you have ideas for future presentations, feel free to reach out to me, or if you have general questions, feel free to contact us at 800-299-9200, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.